So, Dr. Carlson, please tell us all about yourself. It's so good to see you today.
Thank you, Norma. It's really my pleasure to be here this afternoon. There's so many. It's so exciting. Thank you all for taking the time to spend an hour with us. And let me start today just by telling you a little bit about who I am, what my background is, what I bring to the conversation about HSP and PLS. So I'm an occupational therapy practitioner. I've been an OT for 40 years. And for those 40 years, I've come alongside individuals and families who have had neuromuscular disorders. I've worked across the lifespan from neonatal infants all the way to 97-year-old individuals. So I have a lot of clinical experience with tone, with muscle tone, and those kinds of things. Right now, I'm currently serving as an associate, that's my title, associate professor of occupational therapy at Elizabethtown College, which is located here on the East Coast in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I've been there for 26 years, and I'm training up the next generations of occupational therapy practitioners. My research line in this academic position is measuring quality of life, looking at quality of life in individuals who have neuromuscular disorders like PLS, HSP, right? But I'm here today at this conference not because of all of that, but because I met a young man, Paul, about 2 years ago, and he has HSP. And so for the past 2 years or so, we've been journeying this HSP together. And so if it weren't for Paul, I wouldn't be here today. So I'm very grateful for that and then for him in my life right now. So that's a little bit about who I am. So I'm going to talk about navigating HSP and PLS with both purpose and confidence. My goal today is to give you guys some practical tips. I want to connect you with some resources, give you some strategies, and help you see ways to make the activities that matter most easier and more fulfilling in your life. So that's my goal for this afternoon. But first, I need to advocate a little bit for OT and let people know that OT is more than what you see in the OT clinic. An occupational therapist can come into your home, come into your world, come into your community, and help you problem solve with the activities that you have to and want to do in your life. Occupation is not vocation in my world. Occupations are the meaningful activities that comprise our lives, the things we want to do and the things we have to do. And that's why OT is such a powerful resource with something like HP, hereditary spastic paraplegia, MPLS, because we look at the occupations of life and we can facilitate greater independence and a greater satisfaction or ease with that. Most professionals would say that when you have a degenerative neuromotor condition like these diseases, that it's really a good practice to touch base and do a tune up with both a PT and an OT every couple years because the disease progression changes and sometimes that's so insidious or so subtle you don't recognize what the changes are. So you would go to a PT every couple years just to be sure that your exercise regime and your program is spot on to where your body is now, right? And you would go to an occupational therapist to get a tune-up on where your home and your life is right now. So that would be really important to keep in the back of your mind, just keep it on your radar. And OTs do this. They can do this because we have a very different way of looking at the world. And it's deeply ingrained into our DNA. Any OT will look at what you want to do and the way that you're doing it, what you want to and have to do. That's the triangle in the middle. That's the thing that gives purpose and meaning to our lives, the things we do, the people we do them with. And we are trained to look at three different facets that contribute to that success in that behavior. We look at person things, we look at environmental components, and we look at the occupations themselves. And when those three things are in harmony with one another, that's when it feels good. You're in a zone, you're in a flow. Life is good because you're doing what you want to be able to do and what you have to be able to do. And OT recognizes that each one of those circles or spheres has contributing factors and hindering factors. So an OT will look at your person factors, what your body and your hands and your feet can and cannot do, right? And a good OT will also adopt a strength-based approach, focusing on maximizing your current level, your current strengths, and minimizing the impact that those physical impairments may have on your performance. We call that a strengths-based philosophy. It's playing to your strengths. I think all of us can relate to that. We feel best about ourselves when we're doing things that we're having success in and that play to our strengths. Environments, too, they can have supports and they can have hindrances. For most people with lower extremity weakness and spasticity, stairs, like the ones behind me, can be a significant environmental barrier. But if you put a handrail, like behind me, on both sides of the stairs, those stairs become less of a barrier. So when an OT looks at the world, they look at what are the social, physical, cultural, governmental things that are supporting effective participation in life, and what are the environmental factors that are taking it away. Okay. Same thing with the occupations. Occupations you can do in lots of different ways. For example, when you lose hand coordination and you cannot separate coffee filters one from another, and you have difficulty scooping and measuring the coffee and cleaning up the mucky mess that coffee grounds make, right? The easy workaround is a Keurig, right? Because you can pop the cup in, boom, you've got your cup of coffee 3 seconds later. Lots of different ways to do occupations. So before you had lower extremity spasticity or weakness, you probably put your pants and got dressed in this way. You put one leg in the underwear, then the other, pulled them up. One end of pant, the other, pulled them up. Put your socks on and put your shoes on. But if you're in a wheelchair, you've learned that the way to dress is to put your underwear on with your left leg, then your pants on with the left leg, and your sock on with the left leg, the shoe on with your left leg, and then do the same thing with the right leg. So you only have to stand up once. So the hope in this PEO model is you have three areas of change, three areas to play with to help you get that triangle groove of doing what you want to do in a way that's meaningful and impactful and efficient. What happens when you have diseases like HSP and PLS is those person factors get so overwhelmingly big, right? For most of you with symptoms, when you are standing, you are worried about falling. You are worried about your balance. They have a greater impact on your life. And you can see from my diagram, when those person factors get huge, your ability to do what you want to do and need to do gets harder, right? So the strategy is this: you do what you can to impact your body function, and you look strategically and intentionally at your environments and your occupations. Because when your P gets bigger and those factors, those physical factors impact your life more, that's when you need to make changes in your environments and your occupations. Most of us do this on some level intuitively because we have to, right? When you're chasing down something like this, you know this, but I'm asking you to consider doing it more intentionally as a proactive problem-solving strategy. There is power in the three. Let's take the occupation, the PEO, of walking a dog. The one on my left, the one with the singular dog, you've got somebody walking one dog on a rocky trail, right? And if you have difficulty with balance and equilibrium, this can be a very unsafe circumstance. But you can alter the person, the environment, and the occupation to still do that in a meaningful way. For example, if you have lower extremity weakness, you can do ankle exercises to strengthen your balance, right? You can change the environment, go from a rocky trail to a macadam path, right? You can change the occupation with a rollator walker. You can walk two dogs instead of one, and two dogs are always better than one. So changing your occupations doesn't always mean that they're going to be done in a way that's compromised. It can be better. Keurig coffee is easier to make and easier to clean up, and two dogs are better than one. But there is power in that approach of balancing the person, the environment, and the occupation. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through each one of those factors, the P, the E, and the O, and I'm going to hit the highlights or the most impactful concepts that I can to help you understand how to implement changes in your life as you're navigating this disease progression. So let's talk about the P first. With the P, this is Paul and I. One of the most important things to remember is that HSP and PLS are only part of who you are. They are not the defining part of who you are. And I think sometimes the process of navigating these types of conditions can be so overwhelming, you forget that. So one thing you need to always be mindful of is the other aspects of your health, right? As you tend to the PLS and HSP with your neurologist, with your PM&R doctors, remember to go to your general practitioner and tend to those other aspects of health, right? That's so very important. And it's also important to know some of the other ways that neuromotor conditions like these with lower extremity spasticity can impact your health, right? So by definition of having either one of these two conditions, a healthcare professional would call you a fall risk, right? You would be put in that category of a higher risk for falling down. If you're at a higher risk for falling down, it is especially important to know your vitamin D levels and know your bone density, right? You don't want to find out that you have weak bones because you lost your balance, you fell, and you broke something, when knowing that ahead of time could prevent those breaks. And we all on this Zoom understand that these conditions are hard enough. You don't need a break on top of it. So be proactive with things like that. Other things, when you have lower extremity tightness or spasticity, you are more at risk to throwing blood clots, right? Because the natural pumping mechanism that gets your blood from your feet back to your heart is influenced by the increases in tone. So you want to be on top of your cholesterol and your cardiac issues, so you know that. If you are still flying and you have lower extremity spasticity, it is very, very important for you to do those ankle pump exercises, right? Talk with your doctor about other strategies that you can do to prevent that from happening. What's another one? So when you have lower extremity tightness or spasticity, you often have difficulty with bowel and bladder right? Because that's a voluntary muscle. It gets spastic just like the toes and feet and legs do. So you may have difficulty voiding. If you have difficulty voiding, you are more at risk for bladder infections, for UTIs, for gastroenteritis, for constipation, for those kinds of things. So you want to be pulling in other health professions. I always think, people with totally severed spinal cords can be continent for bowel and bladder both. It can be done when you have no sensation going through. So you need to reach out to the urologist and the gastroenterologist to make sure that everything is being done. Women out there who have had kids, your pelvic floor, it's a complex thing. You need to get to a health professional. Don't always assume that those kinds of issues go with the territory of lower motor spasticity. They can, but it's worth checking into. It's only part of who you are. And in this next slide, I want to do a little lesson in neuroanatomy. Neuroanatomy for dummies, if you will. This is the way I explain it and the way I understand it. When you have an upper motor neuron dysfunction, like HSP and PLS, that means that the dysfunction is in the upper part of the neuron, not the lower part of the neuron. And most of us don't have a clue what those two things are. So I'm going to explain it, but I'm going to use the analogy, I'm on the road a lot, of a city hub and a highway coming out, a highway coming out. So I want you to think about your brain as a city, like DC or San Francisco. And I want you to think about your upper motor neuron as that main highway artery that travels south. In DC, it's 395 to 95. In San Francisco, it's 101, right? You go down the highway. And if everything is good and that highway is well maintained, you can fly down that highway as fast as you want to go till you get to your exit. And when you get to your exit, when you get off your exit, you are now in the lower motor neuron pathway. So the lower motor neuron essentially goes from your spinal column. It goes out like an exit goes out on a highway, right? So from the highway exit to your muscle home, the lower motor neuron talks to the muscle directly, right? So you've got a highway system. And think about it. When the government in the city is mucked up, those roads don't get maintained, do they? Those roads get potholes and bumps, and the cars go through, and the cars get damaged, and they go slower. And the messages that normally those cars would, or neurons, the impulses from your brain would travel down the myelin. When they get to the lower motor neuron, they're broken, they're mucked up. And what happens in something that causes the spasticity, the message that gets to the lower motor neuron, or the message that's passed off to the exit, is go, 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 fire, 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 which to the muscle means tighten, 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 right? So what's essentially happening in these two conditions is there's something wrong in the brain that you inherited through DNA. And that is preventing the maintenance of the highway or the myelin or the spinal cord that takes the impulse from the brain to the muscle that actually does the work. It's just so beat up from those darn potholes, right? It tells the muscle to do the wrong thing. Now, the hope and the good news in this is when you have an upper motor neuron dysfunction, that's where it's broken. Your lower motor neuron is still intact. And that lower motor neuron can do a lot on its own without listening to the powers that be. That lower motor neuron can grab something heavier than you think it is and it can adjust the tension. That lower motor neuron can exercise that muscle to get it stronger. If you touch a hot stove burner, it's the lower motor neuron reflex that pulls your hand away, right? It doesn't say, send the message, Nancy, that was so stupid. You touched the hot burner. Let me tell the control center. The control center says, Nancy, that was stupid. Pull your hand away. It comes down. It doesn't have to go through that loop. That hand pulls back reflexively. So, what does that mean? That means that you have potential to build muscle to retain function using that lower motor neuron loop, right? So I asked AI, right? Y'all ask AI things too. So I said, give me an analogy for the upper motor neuron and the lower motor neuron. And AI came back with the one that's on my slide. It says that the upper motor neurons are the planners, and the lower motor neurons from the exit to the muscle are the workers, right? And exercise keeps your workforce ready, ready. I also think of it like the military with our boots on the ground, right? The information, the orders come down, but oftentimes what happens depends on the strength and the resolve and the skill and the training of our men and women who are on the ground in the air and in our oceans, right? That lower motor neuron has that capacity. So I would invite you to think that there are 3 points at which you can influence or push back on your upper motor neuron conditions. The one is in your brain, right? And that's the role of the scientists. People that get up there and use all the words that nobody understands but they, right? How can you impact that? You can look for clinical trials. You can participate in clinical trials. If you're able to financially, the foundation does a lovely job of funneling those dollars into the bang for your buck um, studies. So you can push back there. You can also push back with the upper motor neuron. You want to talk to your neurologist. You want to talk to your PM&R doc. You want to see what other medications are used for other conditions that can also be helpful to you. For example, baclofen has been the go-to drug for spasticity for decades, right? Decades. Dalfamperdine is a drug that came out of use with people with multiple sclerosis, right? Those drugs are already approved. They already have like certification on them. We know the side effects. We can intervene and we can push back on the upper motor neuron. And the lower motor neuron is the place where you have the most control. You have the most control because it is you who does the exercises that push back on the condition. Does that make sense for folks? Anatomy, neuroanatomy 101 related to traffic and congestion. The upper motor neuron is mucked up. It tells the foot to go down into flexion. People call that plantar flexion. That's simply pointing your toe downward. Equinovarus foot position is that turning in of your toe. So because you have upper motor neuron spasticity, your feet pattern tend to go down and towards the center. I think a lot of you can relate to that. Those of you who wear AFOs, right, to prevent that foot drop. Those of you who started to notice symptoms first because you were tripping or you couldn't wear heels or flip-flops anymore, right? It's because the upper motor neuron spasticity hits the feet in that pattern. It also hits your hips into adduction, which is the fancy word therapists use for your knees pulling in, your hips pulling in. A deduction is pulling in, a abduction is pulling out. The spasticity pulls your hips in, okay? So let's go on to my next slide, which kind of tells you how to manage all that. So you need to find your sweet spot. You need to work with your physicians and neurologists to figure out what strategy for chilling that muscle tone down or reducing that tightness or calming that spasticity works best for you. And then once you get that chilled down, you need to maximize what you have through specific targeted exercise programs, right? That's the combination, that's the sweet spot. And when you find those two things, when you're building strength and you're capitalizing on that lower motor neuron, and you've got your spasticity under control, that's when you're going to have the most function, right? So what else do you need to know? That spasticity is not strength. Just because your hips are pulled inward because of the spasticity, that doesn't mean your hips are strong, right? You always want to be exercising balanced muscle groups. So if the muscle groups go out, you practice out and in, right? If your arm comes in and extends out, you work on the muscles on both sides. Spasticity is not strength, okay? And it is so important for you to be working um, on your strength, not just your legs. Your legs, that's intuitive, right? Leg muscles are weaker. We do exercise for that. But it's also important to work on your upper extremity strength, which is why I have the gal holding the dumbbell in her hand there to remind me to tell you the less strength your legs have, the more you are going to need your arm strength for upper extremity function. And those of you who have spent time on Canadian crutches know that firsthand, right? Because you're bearing weight into your arms, right? And the shoulder is not meant to be a weight bearing joint. So you have to keep those arms strong. And the other little known thing is that core is very, very important as well. Your core, think about it. We learn to sit before we learn to walk. As human beings, we were designed to walk based on a stable core. And I think most adults kind of get lost in that. So, exercising your core, exercising upper extremity, and exercising lower extremity, it's part of a package. If you're maintaining health and function and you're pushing back, you want to do all three. All three. All right. So my next slide. This is a little known fun fact that I like to tell people is that your ankle is your first line of defense against a fall. Your ankle is your first line of defense against a fall. Think about the last time you were able to walk on the beach successfully, or you walked on ground that had uneven surface. Your foot gets displaced, but you don't fall down because your foot and your ankle absorb the displacement and the problem is taken care of down low, right? Which means you don't need your righting and your protective responses and your balance equilibrium responses because your ankle is able to absorb it all, right? And you don't fall. So now think about it. When you have upper motor neuron stuff going on with your feet, that your foot is pulled into pointing down and pointing in, you're already starting behind the 8 ball in terms of your ankle strength. As we age, we all lose ankle strength unless we tend to it and do it. I put a pair of heels on the other day. I haven't in a long time. I recognize how much ankle strength I've lost. It just goes with the territory of aging. But when you have upper motor neuron dysfunction, you have two liabilities because you have that spasticity pulling your foot in a different direction. So if you take absolutely nothing from my talk today, it is that you must be exercising your ankles. your ankles. And I have one here. This is a generic one that's pretty good. I pulled it from the National University Hospital in Singapore. And I liked it because it went through all the standard um, exercises for an ankle. And it also had a nice balance between sit down ones and stand up ones. Depending where you are in your disease progression, you always want to be safe. An OT's motto is safety first, safety first. So if you're standing and you have balance issues, most OTs and PTs would recommend that you do them at the kitchen counter in front of the sink where you can hold on. And most OTs and PTs would say it's always prudent to have a nice sturdy chair with arms behind you as you're doing that. Because if you're exercising muscle groups that you haven't used for a while, or you're tapping them in a way you haven't in a while, your muscles can freeze, they can buckle, and it's a lot easier to fall on a chair than it is the floor. So safety first. You take the Nancy challenge. Take 30 days, take a month, and do these exercises, do intentional exercises with your ankles a couple times a week and see if you notice a difference. Um, and there's a good resource there. It's another good reason to have a follow-up with a PT, right? They're just pretty standard exercises, or to work with a trainer. It's easier when you have some accountability.
And Nancy, if I can explain something to everybody real quickly, go back, if you will, to that screen. For those of you that may have your cell phone there handy, you could just take your camera app,
Thank
click it
you.
up there to that QR code looking dots and dinosaur, and it will lead you exactly to that website, and you'll have access to it like on a YouTube channel. So you guys can look at that later. But we'll have this uploaded to our website and use that in a follow-up email to everyone after this is over. I'm sorry, Nancy. I just wanted
No, perfect, Norma.
technology.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I appreciate that. Um, cool beans. All right, so we're here. Let's just talk about devices and devices that can keep you safe while you are still walking and when you are beyond that point. The first thing you need to know is that most healthcare professionals will put you at a real fall risk if you have fallen one time in the past 6 months, two times in the past year, or one time with a fall with a serious injury. That just escalates your fall risk status. So if you have fallen more than two times in a year, I would invite you to work with a PT who knows devices to help you find more tools to use in your arsenal. The key with pushing back on something like HSP and PLS is you don't lose everything all at once, right? So you want to have options to keep you safe. You may be safe to walk with walking sticks in your office because it's all flat and there are no thresholds and there's no inclines. But if you go for a walk with your son or your grandson, you may want to consider having different devices. That's part of the key of navigating these diseases safely, is knowing what kind of device you need and when. And there are more kinds of devices out there than you would imagine. So I encourage you to go to work with your physical therapist to get that. For those of you who are relatively new in the journey, I wanted to start basic and simple. I don't know if most people realize that a wheelchair and a transport chair are two different things. The transport chair is the red one in the photo. You'll notice with the transport chair, you've got four tiny wheels. Transport chairs are really handy for temporary uses. Your doctor's office is at the far end of the medical center. The transport chair is lightweight, it's foldable, it fits easy into a car. That's the perfect purpose for that. You got someone to push you, right? Transport chairs are not comfortable. There is not an ounce of padding on that chair. A wheelchair, on the other hand, has the large back wheels and they're designed to be self-propelling. They're very useful if you are in a chair for a lot of your time when you're out and about in the world, because you have autonomy over your own movements, because you can push and you can have handles if somebody needs to help you up the hill, right? I don't know if most people realize that if you're using a chair full time, you do not want to go to the local durable medical equipment store and pick one out. You want to go to your neurologist or your general practitioner or your PMR doc and get a script, a prescription to get you a customized chair. If you are using a wheelchair for the majority of your mobility, you absolutely need a customized chair. Customized chairs fit your body, so if you're tall, if you're short, they'll find one that fits you. They have custom padding options, and they are a whole lot more comfortable than those clunky ones that you find at the durable medical supply store. They're also ergonomically better for your arms and shoulders because the wheels are set forward a little bit. They're lighter, they're easier to maneuver, they're narrower, they're a lot more functional, especially in real life settings. And I don't know if people realize that you can get a power assist or a motorized assist that goes on a regular wheelchair that you can operate with hand controls. You don't need to go from a walker or a wheelchair to a motorized, big, heavy motorized chair, right? You need to get to a seating clinic, a rehabilitation seating clinic near you. Your neurologist, your PM&R doc should be able to help you with that. Are we ready to leave the P factors? Let's leave the P factors and we'll talk about the E now, environments. Um, I would be not doing my job if I did not emphasize what the World Health Organization is starting to say. The World Health Organization is moving away from the idea that disability is when the body is broken, right? Disability is a socially constructed idea, right? If that is dependent on the environment. According to this social model of disability, the environment is the thing that creates the disability. If all sidewalks had curb cuts, it wouldn't matter if you walked, had a stroller, used a chair, right? It would be accessible to everybody. If all signs had braille, wouldn't matter if you couldn't see. So this notion that the disability is about what the person cannot do or the body broken is a very old one. Don't we all want to live in a world where our environments, our social, our physical, our culture, those environments are embracing of people with differences, with differences. Um, there's a concept out there called universal design. And the whole purpose of this universal design is creating spaces that have equal opportunity and access for everybody who has differences, right? We're all different. Let's make sure our environments can support that. This one is another, I'm going to wink to Norma. This is another QR code. So Norma would say, get out your phone and take a picture of it. It's put out by the AARP, but don't think you have to be old to use it. It's wonderful. And what it is it's a guide for going through your home and maximizing your home to have participation more easily, right? Specific things you can do in your home. Sometimes easy fixes, sometimes contractor fixes. Like a zero entry. A zero entry is going to make it easier for you. It's going to be easier for your kids coming in with the grandkids in their strollers, right? This will help you get your home to be universal design so it works for everybody. So I strongly, strongly recommend that. It's a good one to identify the safety liabilities in your home. Like some of them are no-brainers, right? You take away the throw rugs, right? You take away the throw rugs and you make sure your bath mats have sticky bottoms on that. But this goes way beyond it. It goes through every room in your house, including the kitchen and the outdoors and the basement. It's a really, really useful tool. But I would be amiss if I did not have a specific conversation about bathrooms, because bathrooms are where most people fall in the home. And what I'd like you to do, Paul has this philosophy. So, this is the Paul philosophy of grab bars and bathrooms. We have the push me, pull you philosophy. And what Paul means by that is when you have diseases like PLS, HSP, you don't lose your leg function all at once. It's not a complete spinal cord injury. Most people cannot push themselves to a stand without some oomph from their legs. So you want to maximize this. You always want to have a place that you can push up against and something that you can pull into. And that's going to be the safest way for you to get from a seated position to a standing position when you start having lower extremity weakness and spasticity. There are tons of grab bars out there. In general, horizontal grab bars are meant to be pushed up on, and vertical and diagonal bars are meant to be pulled, right? So you want that combination of push me, pull you. The contractor is the best guy for getting those things in the walls so they don't come out. But contractors have no clue how people use grab bars. So it may be helpful to you to pull in, they call it a certified aging in place specialist who can come into your home and help you figure out where to put the grab bars. Different bathroom configurations invite different possibilities. And you want somebody who knows how people use grab bars, telling you where your grab bars go. If you don't have a choice, you can get the vertical one by the faucet so you can step in and the horizontal one by the back wall. But there's lots more creative and useful ways to do grab bars. So now I'm going to talk about toilets. How fun is that? So one suggestion that I have for men, many men enjoy having a grab bar back behind the tank of the toilet, so that when you're voiding your bladder, you're leaning forward, you have something steady to hold on to, and it can help you void your bladder more completely. Sometimes you want some extra help getting up from the toilet, or you want to feel more secure on the toilet. My philosophy is your home doesn't have to look like a skilled nursing home. There are design products. I like Moen, Moen. Moen has some really nice ones like this that can fit into your spaces and not make it scream disability. So the grab bar behind the toilet tank, the handles on the toilet will really help. And the other one that I have there is a bidet toilet seat that a lot of, and I find gender differences here. I think women look at this and they smile because they like it. And I do too. It's a nice way that you can maintain your hygiene when you don't feel like going through the rigmarole of your normal morning routine. It's just nice to have a backup option like that. And I think that's all I have to say about toilets and bathrooms. All right. So my last few minutes, because I'm running down on time, aren't I, Norma? Yeah. So the one thing that I wanted to definitely talk about in terms of the occupation is one near and dear to almost every adult's heart, which is driving. Driving. And driving is huge for our independence, for our way of life. I get that. I know that. But I'm also going to say something totally radical that even if you can drive, doesn't mean you should be driving, right? A
Right.
car can do a lot of damage. It can change people's lives on a dime. And so you want to be very aware of how your spasticity and your weakness can influence your reaction time, your ability to hold the brake down solid. If you have upper limb function, you may have more difficulty steering or operating the hand controls, right, which are key to safety. And everybody knows that when you have extended driving trips in the car, you have more fatigue when you have something like these. So this is my first suggestion for you. This is called a handlebar, and you stick it in the little latch on the side where the door latch goes in. It's super handy for getting in and out of cars because you can push up on it, right? You can push up on it. I keep mine in the little pocket that's in the door. It's there all the time. And I drive a low sitting car. And Paul is 6 foot and he can get in and out of my car without any problem at all. So it's really handy. This is a really cool resource for you. It's Driver 65. It's put out by AARP. It's a nice safety check. Are you operating your signals? Are you maintaining distances? It's a really good safety check. For many of us, driver's education and that driver's exam was a long time ago. So you want to be sure you have safe driving practices. But my real meat here today is to talk about something like the hand controls. The hand controls are really, really good, especially if you have pure HSP and no upper extremity hand involvement. If you have no upper extremity hand involvement, you are safer driving a hand control car than you are a brake car. And so I wanted to show you this. I still have some minutes, don't I, Norma? Yeah, I'm so good.
Yes.
So, okay, so I'm going to show you this guy. This guy is amazing. He's going to show you how he gets into his car and drives his car with his hand controls. Um, can you hear it? Oh, I don't.
No, we cannot hear it.
Can you hear it now?
So after hopping in, I grab my
Yes.
cushion and then my wheels.
It
And then
stopped.
I pulled this backrest down. I recline my seat all the way back, and then I pull the chair up and over me into the back seat. And then put my seat up. Now let's get ready to drive. Okay, so once I'm in my car, I push forward for the brake, put the car in gear, put my hand in this like spinner thing, and then push down for gas. So now we're coming up to a stop sign. Push forward for brake. Check traffic. We're good. Push down for gas. So when I first started driving with my hands, it honestly wasn't that difficult. It only took me like 20 minutes to get the hang of it. But I honestly think it's easier than driving with your feet. Like it's one hand does the brake and the gas, and it's so simple. And then when I get to my destination, I do the exact same thing. Pull my chair over, grab the wheels, grab my cushion. And honestly, it takes me about a minute to do it. But in the beginning, it would take like 4 to 5 minutes. So I sped it up, and now it's just a part of my everyday life. Come with me, and I'll.
There we go. So, isn't that amazing,
Yes.
folks? If you find your world getting smaller and smaller because it's too hard to walk or you're afraid you're going to fall, you want to look at the mobility device and work with your PT. This guy is totally independent and safe and can navigate the chair. That's a K5 chair, it's a custom chair. That's one advantage of getting that kind of chair over the clunky one is you can get it in and out of your own car. Um, in different ways. So that's there. And I have to tell you how to do that. So you want to have an OT who's a specialist in driver rehabilitation. You want to get a behind the wheel OT evaluation. You can Google your state and driver rehabilitation programs, and it'll get you there. But I do want to make it quite clear. In the state, my home state of Maryland, an OT is not a mandatory reporter for driving unsafely. That means that if you go to an OT in Maryland and you get a driver evaluation, that OT does not have to report you. They are not legally bound to report you to the Department of Motor Vehicles. They can, but they are not legally bound to. You need to know what your state allows. Because if you go in for a driving eval, you want to understand what that OT's responsibility is to the law. That's important to know. And I also wanted to highlight my niece works for Uber, and Uber now has a program called Wave. It's even got a cool name. It's wheelchair access vehicles, and right now it's in San Francisco, LA, Boston, DC, Philly, Chicago, and New York City. So if you live in one of those cities, please use the Uber Wave, because if Uber can understand the impact that this will have on people, then the opportunity will be available in more cities. And so, Norma, that's my thing. I made it to my questions.
Hey,
And
this is wonderful. Lots of information, Nancy. Go ahead. Did I cut you off the QR code? Go ahead.
no, no, these are
Okay.
QR codes. You can just snap them if you didn't get them.
You started your presentation, you talked about making your home your safe environment, right?
Mhm.
They're the problem solvers that can come into your home and help you make sure that you've got things set the way they need to. You mentioned something there about the grab bars, and I
Mhm.
didn't hear who you can recommend to correct the placement, because we always think we got to go hire a contractor. First thing,
Yeah.
let's take some bids. Let's get a contractor in that can put this thing on the wall, you know. Well, they don't really know, but we need somebody that really does know and they can make that available. So who was that can do those for us?
You want to look for the qualification that you want is a CAPS, CAPS, um, Certified Aging in Place Specialist. They can
Aging
be
in
like an
place.
OT or a PT. Um, Anybody who can come in and do a home assessment. Even if you're receiving OT services now in a clinic, what they'll do is ask you to take photos of the setup of your bathrooms, and the OT that's working with you should be able to make recommendations for that. In the old days before COVID, OTs went out in people's homes. It was common practice. Now they'll ask you to take a picture or a video, and they can recommend where the placement is. And then you just put the tape on the wall, and the contractor makes sure it doesn't fall out.
Okay. Catherine, do you have a comment or a question?
How do you find an occupational therapist?
That's a really, really good question. The occupational therapy, there's a national registry for occupational therapists, but there's also state organizations. So there's, like in my home state, the Maryland Occupational Therapy Association. It's where professionals are connected, and they have a registry of the professionals who are licensed to practice in Maryland, in the state of Maryland. Pennsylvania has another one. So you can always start with the state organizations for the profession. Just pick up the phone and call and say, how do I find an OT in Michigan? And they'll be able to help you. Another way to do it is if you have a medical center that is nearby. The larger medical centers that have rehabilitation units will have OTs and PTs. If you're not eligible to work with one of those because of insurance or other reasons, they have lists of other professionals that they can refer out to. So those would be my two starting points. Start local, where you know there's a clinic that does rehabilitation. Those are your boots on the ground, if you will. They know the lay of the land best in your area, right? The statewide organizations have a more complete registry database.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Christine, you got a comment, question? Go ahead.
I do have a comment about occupational therapies. Part of when I go see the doctor at Miami, he's part of the SP CERN, is an occupational therapy evaluation.
Very good question.
Yeah, it is helpful to get an OT evaluation. PTs are really good at muscles and gait and strength and things like that. OTs are trained up more holistically. So we have anatomy and physiology in our background, right? But we also have an understanding of cognition. We have an understanding of fine motor. We have an understanding of sensory motor and how those things work. So you should, a good OT that's a neuro OT. You don't want like an orthopedic OT that does hips and knees and joint replacements. You want to be, you'll find it less frustrating to be with an OT who has a neurology background. So an OT that works on a neuro unit with head trauma or spinal cord injury or MS or Parkinson's or something like that. You want somebody who understands the nervous system, especially with these two kinds of conditions. Did that answer your question, Christine?
I think
It was more of a comment that
Yeah.
when someone asked, how do you find an OT? It's
Mhm.
part of the evaluation with the CERN.
Very good.
So the statement you made about neuro OTs is a good segue to the question I was going to ask. There's a medical school here. I live in Yakima, Washington. There's a medical school here that also has a PT and an OT school, and I'm supposed to give a talk to each one of the classes about neuromuscular diseases. What, since you're a teacher, what sorts of things should I try and impart on them? I've asked another PLS group that I'm a part of, but yeah, I'm just curious as to what you would want to impart on them because a lot of them are going to go out to places and they're just going to work with torn ACLs and things. They're going to work with what I think of as mechanical issues instead of neuromuscular issues, and I want to make them aware of the fact that we're probably not going to get better.
oh, wait, don't say that.
No,
Yeah.
and OTs are a special bunch, and I think that we learn very much from your life story or your lived experience. So when you talk to the OTs, your most powerful voice is going to be your own experience, right? Because the OTs can look up all the stuff about upper motor neuron and stuff like that. That's not your job. But it's your job, I think, if you will. I don't mean to tell you what your job is. I don't mean to be offensive, but I think the thing that you bring most strongly to the table is your own personal experience and being open with that. Talk about what your first symptoms were, how they got diagnosed, what it meant in your life, what you had to change, what you're dealing with now, and how it impacts the other areas of your life. I think that's something that all health professionals should be asking of folks, that we know the individual journeys of the people. And I think by sharing your story, you'll convey what you want to say, and it'll come off as genuine and it'll be well received, right? And thank you for doing that. On the other side, I love it when people come into my classes and just share their journeys, because I think that's the most powerful experience a student can have. They'll remember you in that classroom long after they remember what that teacher said. So, I just want to make clear, an OT cannot do medication management. Like medication is something that the doc can do, right? That's out of my scope of practice. So you want to be talking with your particular doctor about what your health risks are, right? And specifically ask about some of those things that I mentioned. One thing that I like to do, I don't know whether the docs like it or hate it, but I like to go in with the articles. And the last time I did a Medline Sinol search on hereditary spastic paraplegia, there were two really good articles that were brand new. One was a meta-analysis and one was a scoping review. I can get that information to Norma, but that's good news for the people on this Zoom, for everybody, because what it means is there's starting to be enough evidence that studies these conditions that there are people that are looking at how the study findings relate to one another. And that is what a meta-analysis or a scoping review do. And there's two of them out there. One was in 2023, one was in 2024. That would be really helpful tools for you if you have that kind of relationship with your doc and your doc is open to that kind of stuff. It can, the doc speaks the language of those articles in the way that most of us don't. So maybe an article can say something. Norma, I'll get that information to you.
You know, what about for some of the folks that are not able to get out of their wheelchair, right? So they can't keep themselves as mobile and transitional. So, you know, the occupational therapist can help them find ways to live and to have activities in the wheelchair, right?
That is totally cool. If you'll forgive me, my device is running out of battery. I'm going to go plug in. So my location is going to change, and the lighting's going to change. But even if you're using a wheelchair, there's a lot of things that you can do. You want to be working with, you still hear me okay? You want to be working with a physical therapist to give you a seated workout so that you can do that in your wheelchair. A good physical therapist can also give you some suggestions on exercises and stretches that you can do while you are still in bed in the morning or after you go to bed at night. One of the things that Paul, I'm going to share his story, was really helpful for him was in his bathroom. He had, before me, he had just a regular under the sink cabinet there. And I had the contractor put in a special cutout there. So now he can wheel up to his sink and get his feet and knees under the sink. So when he spits out the toothpaste, it hits the bowl of the sink, right? So there are lots of things that OTs or recommendations that OTs can make. OTs can help you if you cannot stand anymore, but you have upper body strength. You can use a slide board to get from your wheelchair to a bath chair. So it doesn't matter what your ability level is or what your mobility level is. There's strategies. When Paul and I first got together, I watched a lot of videos of paras, people who had had complete spinal cord injuries and how they live from a wheelchair. And that was very inspiring, I think, for both of us to see how good you can live when you're using a chair. And I would argue that your quality of life actually goes up because you don't have to worry about falling, right? You can focus on what you need to do and know that you're safe. And that matters a lot.
Be safe and be blessed. Thank you, Nancy, very much.
You're welcome.
We'll have this on YouTube.